Hi there and welcome to the Explaining History YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk about Richard Nixon, particularly Richard Nixon and the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon comes to power, he wins the presidential election in 1968. The most credible rival for the job is Bobby Kennedy, who's assassinated that year. Lyndon Johnson, completely defeated by the Vietnam War, decides that he doesn't want to run for re-election. So Nixon campaigns, one of his several promises to the electorate is that he will find an honourable peace. Honourable peace, really, when you decode it, means that he will extricate America from Vietnam with the minimum of humiliation. America has essentially lost the Vietnam War, but Nixon wants to give America an out from the Vietnam War without the mantle of defeat. So if America is seen to be defeated, it'll be a catastrophic blow for America's world position, particularly at the height of the Cold War, and a humiliation for Americans at home who have become accustomed with the idea that America is invincible. So Nixon has a problem in that the conditions that the North Vietnamese put on the peace talks, which have already begun in Paris in 1968, are that the government of South Vietnam be kind of disavowed by the Americans, and also that the Americans leave without any kind of end of hostilities between North and South. The North obviously want to keep the door open to reunification. The Americans want to leave Vietnam, but leave Vietnam on their own terms, i.e. leaving behind a friendly government. It will look terribly bad if Saigon falls, for example, which it does in 1975. So Nixon decides that the way to deal with this problem is to, firstly, before he decides to deal with the problem at all, he invades Cambodia in 1970. He invades Cambodia secretly without the say-so of the American public. He's already told the American public that the war is going to be de-escalated, so this is quite a campaign lie. As a ground invasion and a bombing invasion to destroy Viet Cong and supply bases along the Cambodian-Vietnamese border and to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And this doesn't bring the North Vietnamese to the negotiating table because there is this constant belief, and Johnson tried it as well, that fresh rounds of bombing will finally break the will of the North Vietnamese to resist, and it doesn't. So in 1972, Nixon does two things. Firstly, he promises a ceasefire, and the ceasefire will allow an American withdrawal, but it will not necessitate the North Vietnamese from ending their campaign against the South Vietnamese. It's just that America is stepping out of the fight. The process of Vietnamization that's been going up to this point, fighting over to the South Vietnamese army, hasn't been very successful. The morale is extremely low in the South Vietnamese army, and the number of desertions escalates the more American troops withdraw from the fighting. So the second thing Nixon does in 1972 is Nixon arranges via Henry Kissinger to visit China. China is one of the two communist enemies of the United States, and China is also engaged in a bitter feud with the USSR, which is on the verge of turning into a kind of a border war. And so Nixon knows that if he teams up with China, this will put immense pressure on the Soviet Union. Now, it just so happens that China and the Soviet Union are North Vietnam's two main backers diplomatically and in terms of arms, and if you can go and visit Mao, the Soviets will feel that they're being ganged up on, and they will hopefully, and this does come to pass, it's a, say what you like about Nixon, it was a great diplomatic coup. The Soviets will then invite Nixon to Moscow, which they do, and they will say, what can we do for you, Mr. Nixon? And in addition to limit to nuclear arms talks, the thing that Nixon really wants is to get the Soviets and the Chinese to put pressure on the North Vietnamese to facilitate an American withdrawal as quickly as possible. And by 1973, he's achieved it. So there is a potted history, not the whole history by any stretch of the imagination, of Nixon's diplomacy and various ploys to try to get America out of the quagmire of Vietnam. I hope you found this useful. If so, remember to subscribe and give us some likes and all the works, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you.